Ivo, I'm very happy that you agreed to be here.
I'm happy to be here.
And yeah, the stage is yours, I would say.
The stage is mine. Thank you. Good morning. As I said, I'm sort of a schizophrenic person, being with one foot at academia, another foot in business. And hopefully both sides of my personality will be somewhat evident. I hate monologues, but I presume a dialogue would be difficult with so many of you. So please feel free to come later, because there might be some things you want to sort of go deeper, because there might be some things which are challenging, there might be some things which are interesting, and some things which might not. So what is this all about is that as a consultant, actually the only thing we do, we help our clients go through a change. Because if nothing changes, there's no reason for us to be there or to actually assist or to do anything. And to actually benefit from change, transformational change, small changes, you need to go through a journey. So you need to first understand as an organization, but also as a person, where am I? And where do I want to be? So sort of envision the future of that journey. The second is, how do I get there? So do we know how actually to come to the place, across this valley of despair to the future? And once we are there, how do we make it work? Or how do we make it sustainable? So how do we ensure that actually what we have changed actually deliver benefits, and that we can then go through another challenge? Going through the journey has a number of challenges, and here I posed a number of critical questions, and they're connected to each other. So when we work with our clients, and they say, okay, do we know, or do they know, in which kind of market are they operating in? Do they understand their ecosystem, the business ecosystem or a social ecosystem which they operate? The second question is then, okay, if I understand where I am and where I should be in the context of my operations, what kind of strategy do I need to actually be able to be successful in that market or in that ecosystem, regardless of what the definition of success is? The third question is, okay, so I understand, I do have a strategy, but do I have the capabilities to actually implement the strategy? Do I have the processes, systems, organizational structure in place that will help me achieve that strategy? And last but not least, I know where I need to go, I understand my market, I have a strategy, I have all capabilities, but do I know how to translate that into performance? So do I have the people with the right skills, right knowledge, and right behaviors to actually use the capabilities to implement the strategy and to become successful in the market? And why change? So what do you expect from a change? You expect something to change. So you expect actually, and this is the way I think, we think, is that in the first instance you want to understand why it is important to change. So you want the people who you expect to change, the organization follows, why should we actually change? What's bringing that? Do we have the capability? So are we able actually to go through the change? And lastly, do we have a right commitment to actually implement and do the work in a new way that we have just decided upon? But change is not easy. Going through a change is fundamentally not easy. And through my experience and my work at university, but also at the Accenture, somehow through a number of years came a sort of structure that there are 9 fundamental reasons, the way we look at it, why is change difficult. And I'll go in each of those in detail, and then also link it to the work that we do with serious gaming and simulations. And some of these challenges are more individual, some of them are more structural, some behavioral, some system-oriented. And my belief, and it is a belief system, but based on my experience of the last 30 years actually developing serious games and simulations, is that the games and simulations as a methodology, as an approach, as a tooling, are actually extremely successful in helping us answer those questions that change poses, but also address these challenges, the 9 reasons why change is difficult. And again, there might be different definitions. When we talk about games and serious games and simulations, we needed, not only because of us, but because of our clients, we needed to start to clarify, okay, but what do we mean by that? And one dimension to clarify is clarified in what we call sort of a technical way, so that we recognize analog games, games that don't require any computational power, any computers. It is something that we play with people. Alternate reality games, which are games which you believe you are in reality, so using all the social media that you use in daily life. So it is your pretend day in a life, but it's not reality. It is actually a parallel reality, but you are not using game elements developed for that experience. You are not in a virtual world. You are in a real world doing things that you would be doing anyway every day, but actually it is pretend. It is a different, and I'll explain later that one of the examples is. Then we have the virtual games, computer games, so either 2D, 3D, and also now augmented reality things coming in with Google Glass and similar technologies. And then the last are actually simulations, and a distinction between the sort of the gaming and the serious gaming and simulations, that what we, for our definition of simulation, is if the complete model of reality is actually computer-based. So there are mathematical models behind those. And I'll give an example of that. So coming to the first challenge, why is change difficult, is that different elements of organization change at different speed. You can change strategy if you want to, literally every hour or every day. But if you want to change the processes that actually should enable you to implement a strategy, that takes longer. If you want to change the capabilities of your organization, takes even sort of skills and competencies. And all these layers coming to the culture, which is most difficult, and it takes the most time to change. I see some people taking, this will be available, so you don't need to take photos and pictures of it. So whoever wants this, just mail me and you can get it. Nothing secret there. So the challenge of these elements having different speed is that they tend to break each other. So the reason why it's difficult, because you want to implement your strategy as quickly as possible, but if your strategy requires changes which take more time, then you have a challenge that the things that go fast can break the things that go slow, and otherwise the things that go slow can slow down things that need to go faster. And then you need to recognize as an organization actually the limits to change that your organization has. And secondly, you have to be able to manage that not by managing individual elements, which very often large organizations tend to do. So we have a process, we have a system, we have that. But you have to manage the slippage. You have to manage the integration, the interrelationship between those elements. So one example of the game that we developed for one of our clients, which is the large international transportation company, is an analog game which was structured around sort of metaphorical, simplified representation of their actual processes. It's a railroad company, so people had to build railroad cars. But the way that we structured the game is that we actually mimicked all of those difficulties of sort of, that's the easy way of saying, well, the strategy is this, let's just go and do it, to that there are things that go slower in there, because if you have to teach people to do things differently, it takes more time than just tell them that they should do things differently. So we have symbolized these challenges in a change coming from these different elements of organization which are changing faster or slower, to bring to light that you need to think about your change in a more integral way, and you need to recognize those limits so that you actually can focus better on what is important. To give you an example of, for instance, when they begin, they would get some kind of a rasters to do it, and then there will be a change. They would get suddenly different rasters, or there would be a change of technology. So instead of very bad scissors, they would get the better scissors, or they would have a very bad glue, they would have a better glue. So there's a technology changing, the process was changing, the people doing different things was changing. Suddenly they were working with different colleagues who were used to different material. Suddenly they have to, so we were simplified, but modeling actually all of those challenges coming from this different speed of change. The second reason, incidentally, does anybody know, because I thought it was like common knowledge, what EGAP and NEGAP is? No, okay. EGAP is everything going according to the plan. And NEGAP is nothing is ever going according to the plan. So if you are ever been involved, even if you think about change in your personal lives, and especially me coming from a large organization, we're working with our clients, is that all of them are mostly planning in based on, yeah, it will be fine. Everything will go according to the plan. We have a plan, we just have to execute the plan, fine. But that is happening never, ever. And if you plan for actually no flexibility, if you plan for certainty, you will definitely fail. And so the challenge, the second challenge, why is change difficult, is because of this behavior that we tend to overestimate the benefits, we tend to underestimate the costs, because otherwise we would not be getting the permission to do whatever we want to do. And also, we think that we can make a rational weighting of things, but the world is not rational. The world is a mixture of rational and irrational and purely biological, if you want to say it. So it is difficult to do that, and it is better then to actually build the capability in your organization, in your processes for uncertainty, than trying to pretend that everything will be fine. I mean, I come from the Netherlands, at least I'm in 22 years in the Netherlands, but I haven't ever seen a large infrastructure project which was on time and on budget. So, and we are not such a bad country in terms of doing things right. So it's something to think about. One of the games that we developed was for the large global energy company. It was to look into the resilience, looking into the way the companies should operate to actually remain resilient or become resilient and then remain resilient, by focusing on those things around uncertainty, focusing on the things around can we survive different scenarios of the future, and what are the choices that we have to actually manipulate the play with, so that we can actually survive and benefit from different possible futures. And the game was focused on the seven characteristics of and some of you are laughing because you know it, because you work with it, 7 characteristics of long-living companies, because if they live longer than 400 years, they must be doing something right, the assumption is. So we looked into what are the characteristics and what are the continuum on those characteristics, and how can we play with these things on a continuum to actually help organization define the space within which, so the bandwidth of possibilities, so that they would be actually more flexible, so they would not have to pretend that every plan will be executed always the way that has been planned, so that you plan for this flexibility. The third reason why change is difficult is that change implies, per definition, diverse and conflicting interests. And it is a false assumption to think if I'm helping my organization to change that employees and the management and my suppliers and my other stakeholders and my clients and the customers, that all of them will have the same perception about where are we going and why do we need to go there and how do we go there and will it be successful. And because you have these conflicting interests, the change creates challenge of how to manage it in a productive way, and how to manage it so without loss of a part of the organization say, well, forget it, or part of the organization says, yeah, we will do it, they do it, and then the moment the program ended, they say, just go back to the old way of working. And I can come with countless examples of how you can overtly or sort of openly or not openly frustrate change just because you're not agreeing with the other stakeholders on the purpose and the benefits of it. So the challenge is how do you create a win-win situation, which very often it is very difficult, if impossible, but you need to make an attempt. And how do you minimize this value of despair for some of those stakeholders that are going through the change? This is one of it's actually being developed now, so this may be a little bit premature to say as we have it, but it's being developed. It's one of the largest things we ever did. It is the simulation wrapped around with a serious game that should help European cities to define the measures and test the measures that would help them to reduce the CO2 emissions. And to do that, not only conceptually, but to do it actually almost at the level of the physics, we simulated the cities at the level of the house. So there are 6 cities in a consortium: Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Vienna, Lyon, Genoa, and I'm missing Amsterdam, Hamburg. This is for the Amsterdam. We modeled Amsterdam with its 500,000 buildings, and for each building we had the data on energy use in terms of electricity and gas and solar potential and a heat. So there's about 120 data points for each unit in a city to actually simulate how the city works, and then use that as a basis to define measures as, okay, let's see, we see a lot of gas usage in this part of the city. What would happen if we extend our thermal grid there? So, okay, we are going to extend thermal grid there. So we say, okay, in this place, we are going to measure is extension of a thermal grid. What is the effect on usage of energy? What is the effect on CO2? What is the effect on the renewables? What is the effect? Which is, in a sense, very complex. The project is almost 2 years now, and we are finishing in the summer. But having that in its own right will not actually help, because that is sort of, okay, now I know how it works, and now, because if you want to extend the thermal grid, you have the network company, you have the housing corporation, you have the city government. There are many stakeholders who have different interests in actually having something being done or not being done, but also the very legitimate worries about how much it will cost, is it being sustainable, how is it integrated. To give one example, if you say, hey, a lot of energy usage, we will replace gas with the heat, thermal heat, thermal system, that will save energy. But if the housing corporation, which owns this, then a year after decides to retrofit those buildings, meaning that we insulate, the whole business case for this very expensive infrastructure that was being laid out will be completely destroyed. But these different parties have different. So what we did is developed a game around it. So where there are different parties actually having a different access to the system, and they design their own strategy, and then we use the sort of the gaming format to have them come collectively together. So what is the best for the city? Because just knowing mathematically that if I extend the thermal grid, it will cost me so much, and this is the potential CO2, does not help unless you get the municipality to give you the permit, because the street is very narrow, so you cannot dig everywhere, so I have to dig somewhere else. So if the housing corporation says, well, I'm not sure whether I'll be fully on this year, maybe next year or next year. The customers who have to actually then start paying differently. So this whole network of relationships. And why, with it going back to the challenge, is that you need this transparency between different stakeholders to actually achieve a change. You cannot achieve change if you think only in your own narrow street. You have to include the others. You have to be inclusive, and you have to sort of put you at a position, I might lose something, I might win something, but collectively, actually cooperatively, we will be better off. Because there's this complex system you cannot view only from a very simple perspective. And the games, especially in this case, helped enormously to actually get all of these parties together to start thinking about win-win situation and not looking into own individual interests, supported by data, supported by analytics. The fourth reason why change is difficult is that, and that comes back to I call it biology or evolution, so who we are, is that change requires relationships which are symbiotic. Actually, the most successful organisms, if you look evolutionary, are symbiotic organisms. Those organisms which were able to sort of integrate their functions with the functions of the others and actually then go forward together. Even to the level that our cell, so which our bodies make, so all the cells are actually originally symbiotic, because there was a cell without a core, and then a virus came in, and then the virus was integrated and became a core of a cell, and now we actually, but also if you look at the moment, I mean, how many bacteria we have without which we would die, it's a symbiotic relationship. And in the nature, most successful relationships are symbiotic. So the delivery, if you want a successful change, you should deliver it through actually working together and not by competing. So it is not the survival of the fittest in a sense of survival of those which are the quickest and which are the best and the biggest. No, it's the survival of those which are most networked. Survival of those which actually can fit in the environment in which they operate in and be part of that environment, depending on it and also providing dependency for the others. So the managing the change through what we call co-evolution instead of competition. Because if you would be competing against everybody all the time, you would not exist. You have to cooperate, you have to work together. And it's not easy. So one of the games that we developed and implemented different clients, this was for the large bank, is to develop a game where they are managing a sort of metaphor of an organization. So not their organization, but a sort of a organization structure, is to highlight actually this dependencies in organization of different stakeholders from each other, so that they think, so when you have a department and they are extremely successful in delivering their targets, but then at some point they realize, but it doesn't matter because we are only delivering a single part of the product that the whole organization, that the client wants. So yeah, if you think of let's say a car, and you have department producing the wheels, so you have perfect wheels, but there's no engine, or there's no chassis. So you have to do it together. You have to cooperate. And then we use the game not only to highlight the importance of this what we call co-evolution in a system, but also to test actually the ability of the teams to start thinking differently. So on one side you highlight the importance of, and then you can use it to actually see, well, whether you can do it, and if you can't, to identify the elements that need to change, to identify those things where we need to focus to actually improve the situation. Change, why is a change difficult? Again, because change is not an event. Many organizations says, okay, we have a change plan, and then we change, and that's it, and then everybody will be happy after. Change is a process, and change is a continuous process, and it's a never-ending process. And so to overcome this resistance, You have to start thinking about the change in a different way. And also going back to the biology or evolution is that the organisms we reach equilibrium, they die. Equilibrium actually means death, because you have to continuously on the edges be chaotic to actually be able to respond to the changes in your environment, because your environment is continuously changing. There is no stable, because if your environment is stable, you become stable, nothing happens. So what does it mean? Nothing happens. You are dead. So you need that movement. You need that almost chaotic behavior on the edges of your organization to actually go successfully through continuous change. So one of the games that we developed, and it's one of the most entertaining, well, some of you might know, people coming from Delft, we played it a couple of times, is where we use the kindergarten as a metaphor. And as a facilitator, I am a client, and I am a 2-year-old, very smart 2-year-old, who has hired some consultants to help him save the kindergarten from being taken over and destroyed. And but me as a child, I can't read, so please don't come with words, but come with pictures. I have limited attention span, so you only get 5 minutes to tell me how should I help my kindergarten. And also, I'm not available all the time, but if you really want to talk to me, you can come to me and you can. So. And I'll just an anecdote how this very simple game triggers the understanding actually of how the change works. Is was running for the large chemical company, and it's with the directors of different plants. And they had to be trained as change managers. So actually they have to be able to lead change of their organizations. So we played as part of the program this game, and there were these people playing, preparing these things, how to convince me as a client to hire them to actually help change the organization. And one of the teams was doing nothing. And I said, well, I mean, that must be so disconnected or whatever, because others were gluing and writing and making all these nice things, but the one thing was actually doing that, at least that I could not see. I said, no, everything is fine, it will be fine. It comes time for the presentation. They took 2 flip charts, they hanged a scarf, and out of nowhere they came with the paper gloves, and they actually did the puppet theater presentation. They say, I'm a mother, as a mother, this is my perspective, and I am the director of the kindergarten. So they not only were able to communicate the message, but they fully understood actually who the client is and how the client actually receives the message and what kind of message. Because to a child, what is better, this or a puppet theater? It's a puppet theater. But it's not part of the game, so there's this invention in the game. And why is it important? Because these people needed to understand what are the elements that make change successful, because they would be the leaders of the change. So, of course, with every game, the game in itself is an event, it's an exercise, what happens after the game is what matters. So for instance, this game lasts about 2 hours, debriefing lasts 4 hours, because you want to get things out, what did they experience, why they experienced, what was happening, and how do you translate that into actually action in your organization. I'm dead, so let me do it this way. Oh, I'm very dead. So I'll start dancing and.
Something go wrong. I didn't know what. Really no idea what's happening.
Okay.
Okay.
We moved.
Yeah, we moved. Okay. Moved by pressing.
By pressing the. Okay.
By pressing the tab.
Another reason why change is difficult is there are different competing theories on the change. And yesterday we heard about the constructivists and the behavioralists. And so there are different theories, and all of them are competing for attention. And all of them are trying to convince the management that if you do this, based on this theory, you will be successful. And these theories are competing with each other, because you have theories says if you provide a carrot and a stick, the change will work. Some of them, no, we should be all hugging each other and hugging the tree in the meantime. So that will work. Some of the theories says, no, you should just change things, and then based on the experiences, you can then, so many different theories. And there is a new theories coming online through the understanding of how our brain works, and which I tend to sort of slowly migrate toward those theories, is that you actually have to create experiences which are dense. And through the density of experience, you actually are able to get people sort of focus better, and through that focus actually achieve the change. And it is because our brains are quite limited. He's looking very, yeah, I'm fine? Okay. Sorry? Some time I have, okay. But not so much. I have to speed up. How to change. Okay, so I have to do it differently. Okay. An example of the game that that we use to sort of create this density of the focus for the client was for the large chemical company, where we squeeze the 8 weeks of the process they have to go to actually develop a relationship with the key suppliers in 2 days. And we created a country they had to go through. So they had to go through an island of categories to the land of additional value. And they had the passports, and at every crossing they had to get the stamps based on. So we created a very sort of funny and entertaining and engaging experience on the surface. But under, they were actually going through all of the steps that they would go and experience actually what they should do in those 8 weeks to help them to create insights on the challenge they're facing, to provide focus, because the focus is the most important, and to sort of come up with the solution. Okay, what are the skills, what are the behaviors we need, what is the knowledge that we need to actually successfully go through that change? Because this 8-week process was an organizational way to tell them you need to start doing things differently, so we will structure it for you. But yeah, you can just give it and say, okay, now I need to read it and I need to understand what to do, or you create an experience around it. So they learn by doing it, but in a concentrated time. Change is stressful. So another reason why change is difficult, because biologically, that's how we are wired. If you ask me now to learn the language of the Hopi Indians in Arizona, I would be using this part of the brain and not this part of the brain, which I'm now using to talk to you in English. And this part of the brain accidentally uses more sugar from my body. So anytime that we are confronted with something new, we are just draining sugar from our body, and it's more complex than just sugar, but we are draining energy, and we become tired without knowing that we become tired, and then we become stressed without knowing that we are stressed, and then comes the reaction is, I can't, or I don't want to, it doesn't make sense. So this resistance to change is not because that the people are unwilling and people are but people are literally not unable. And especially in the circumstances when you said, okay, organization is changing, so these are the new way of working, this is how you're going to do in the future, the process, this is that. And that will go live in 2 months or 4 months in a year. But in the meantime, you have to do your job the way you have always done, because the change has not happened yet. So you're sort of becoming a multiple personality. I have to learn the new way of working, but I cannot implement it immediately because the organization is not ready. So you go back to, so what do you think, how successful that will be? So if you, as an organization, want to change something, you have to immediately create the focus and attention on that and start doing it from day one, and not sort of allow living the two worlds, the future world and the world of the now. Because you need to hardwire these things with speed. You have to be fast. You have to go through and even if you will start failing, doesn't matter, it's a part of the process. But if you wait for the perfect moment will never come. One of the games we use to sort of stress test the students, selected students to come into to Accenture is we had an alternate reality game where in the course of 2 days they have to solve an artificial problem of a very rich Indian company trying to build a utopia island in India, so with all the technological, social, architectural, all different challenges. They have to use the emails, there's a Face account, there's a Facebook account, there's a Twitter account. So they're using all the normal media in a very concentrated time, come to different solutions, sort of stress test their ability to very quickly start focusing and delivering solutions. Because that's also the way of how then we select the brightest and biggest, is the ability to actually focus and translate that focus in quick learning and implement that learning immediately. Another reason why change is difficult, why do we learn? Why did I learn to talk? So I don't have to learn to talk every day. Why did I learn to write? So I don't have to learn. So we learn in order not to have to learn continuously. So it's a sort of paradox. And how do you go out of that paradox is that you have to start thinking and looking at learning differently. And many organizations are still focusing on the learning in terms of I have to teach the habits or I have to teach how to change the habits instead of actually teaching or enabling people to learn. And there is all the information, all the knowledge that's available, it's available in the system. But if you don't know how to learn, you will not be able to change because then every time you have to learn new things instead of I know how to learn and every time I need to actually change something, I use my learning knowledge to learn to actually start learning for change. Because the learning is the most sustainable actually, if you're competing with other companies, competitive advantages, can my people learn faster and better than the rest? It's the only thing that matters. And this is the game related to that way of learning where it's an airplane from Lego for 4,000 pieces of Lego. Where they had in a day, they have to build an airplane, but it's fine. The left side people and the right side people, they cannot talk to each other, they cannot see each other. And at the end of the day, these two things have to fit together. And then again, they identified actually were they able to implement this. So, am I able to learn through the process? Not am I able to actually learn the facts and the things, but am I able actually to use my ability to learn to quickly start? Because this is not a business. You're not building airplanes from 4,000 pieces of Lego. But as a metaphor, but also as a very technical thing, how do I use my learning capability to go about this? And I have only 3 slides and then it's the last. The last challenge is that why is change difficult? Because we use communication as the main vehicle for change. Anybody knows there's a research done of the success of the verbal and written communication in a context of organizational change? What percentage of communication actually succeeds, is successful? 12. 5. So the research is 12%. It's a very low percentage. So we use the communication as the main vehicle for achieving change, knowing that it is the least successful in actually achieving change, because only a very low percentage of communication is successful. And then it comes to the game. So you have to start going beyond the language, and I'm thankful if Duke is ever to gaming the future's language. It's about communicating in a different way. It's using games as a way of communicating on one side, and such experiences. Secondly, is communicate when walking to talk, so that you actually have to, in your organization, enable that the management is actually changing themselves first, and then taking the organization after them. And to end. This game demonstrates that, but this is the game that I will be playing. What was it later today? 5 o'clock, you said? 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock. So all of you are welcome. It's a half-an-hour game. So I won't say much about it because then I'm revealing the secret. It will be there, and we can play it. We can play it for maximum of 60 people. But I don't expect that all of you will there anyway. So. And I won't, because I see that you will get it. What I say, that why is the game effective? Because of the big picture, memories of the future, shared intelligence, confidence and success. And what does it deliver? And my observation, my conviction is we learn faster, we learn better, so we decide better, we remember more, and we pay less. I mean, it sounds maybe counterintuitive, but believe me, developing a game for a large change program and implementing it is much cheaper than doing it in a traditional way. Although maybe initial investment is bigger, but the impact and the benefits and the way of how you can make it replicable is much better. My email, if you want a presentation, you can get it. And the quote by Pavarotti, so learning music by reading about it's like making love by mail. So learning gaming by listening to Ivo is like making love by mail. So I would invite you to come later today to play a game. Thank you. Time for a question or two or not?
One question.
One question. You were first.
Well, I was wondering, I'm a teacher, an educator. In SS, I'm also a change manager, I think.
Yes.
Do you use all those 9 steps that you are teaching? Do you use this approach in your...
Yeah, when I teach, and I'm teaching game design, so that's even more related. I think about these things. I'm looking at my audience as they had to change, me as well, because I'm changing with them, but they had to change. And I'm thinking about the reasons why it could be difficult, and then try to manipulate, to sort of do something about. And of course, in a very short intervention, I'm not going to go theoretically what kind of theories we are. So, but it is sort of become part of my process.
You use also games with it?
Yeah. We use games to teach, but also use games to teach games and to teach game design. But you're welcome to talk to me later, so I'm here until Friday. Thank you.